Hey guys, Paul here from FamilyWheels.ca with another car review for your growing family. And this week, we're looking at, well, a whole new segment of pickup truck if Nissan has its way. It's the middle ground, somewhere between a half-ton and a three-quarter-ton. It's the new Nissan Titan XD. Now, the Titan hasn't had a redesign since it was first conceived and brought onto the market in 2004. Many years later, over a decade, finally we have a second-generation Titan, and this is the more beefed up version of that. XD stands for extra duty, and what Nissan is trying to do here is find a middle ground between the comfort and fuel efficiency of a half-ton while you still have a bit of extra capability of a three-quarter ton. So it's filling in that gap somewhere in the middle. Now, if you look closely here, you might notice that there's a Cummins turbo diesel stamp right on the side of this truck. Yes, for the first time ever, Nissan has partnered with Cummins, a brand that typically you'll find only in the Dodge Ram brand of pickup truck, and we have a 5-liter diesel on board this tester as well. So let's see how this new Titan does in terms of comfort, in terms of capability as well, and in terms of just hauling around your family in day-to-day life. That's all coming up this week on Family Wheels with this new, pretty slick looking Titan XD. I always see the size of these bags. So Nissan has actually done something rather interesting here with this new Titan. They've decided to release the XD version before the typical lighter weight version of the Titan that we've seen on the market for years now. And I think that speaks to the fact that this HD segment is so important to the North American market. Now, this means that you're going to have a slightly more expensive truck than the previous Titan that we've seen because, well, you've got a lot of different bells and whistles available to you, and it is a bit more of a hardcore truck. So let's look at that price point here. We can get into one with a gasoline V8 on board for about $46,000. You can't get into a Titan XD with the diesel unless you're looking at about a $55,000 price point. And then this Platinum Reserve edition of the Titan with a diesel on board is maxing out at about $75,000. So a fairly big range there, and about 10 different trims available to you as well in this truck. So you really can fine-tune it to what it is exactly that you want, including a bit more of an off-road package as well. When we look at this compared to a Dodge Ram three-quarter ton truck, for example, if we have that with a crew cab, and this only comes in a crew cab, by the way, regardless of the trim that you choose, if we have the diesel option and we add a 4x4 option as well, all of a sudden you can't get into that truck for less than about $65,000. Now, speaking of number crunching, let's take a look at this truck compared to a half-ton and a three-quarter ton, because it is trying to cut its way right down the middle, and it's doing just that. We compare this to a Ford F-150 half-ton, for example, and its towing capacity is better. But I was surprised to see that the payload capacity, what you can put into the box of the truck, is actually better in some Ford F-150s than in this XD. And when we compare this to a Dodge Ram with a three-quarter ton platform on board, all of a sudden we kind of start to see this truck not being quite as capable. But, and this is exactly what Nissan was going for here, this truck, while still a little bit more capable than a half-ton, is so much more refined than a three-quarter ton. Those trucks can often feel pretty rough and rumbly going down the road. So one of the things that I love about this truck are these zero gravity seats that Nissan has normally put into its Nissan Maxima luxury sedan. The result is a very comfortable ride and a very quiet ride as well. When I saw that this was going to have, a big Cummins diesel on board, I thought that it might be fairly noisy, but in fact Nissan has done a lot with the kind of glazing it's putting into its windows, with the kind of insulation and noise dampening. Let's get ourselves up to speed here and use our decibel reader to see just how loud this truck is. And always on the same strip of highway, by the way, I reached 61 decibels, and that's quieter than a lot of luxury SUVs that we've tested on this program. So 61 decibels at 100 kilometers an hour with a great big diesel on board and some pretty decent towing capability. That's a nice middle ground. But ride comfort isn't perfect. I mean, if we compare this to a half-ton Dodge Ram or a GMC Sierra, both of those trucks feel a lot smoother. The suspension is more refined, but at the end of the day, this is still a larger, more heavy-duty truck, and this is based off the same platform as Nissan's large cargo utility van. Another thing that's bothering me, and this is one of the bigger issues I've encountered, is the transmission. It's a 6-speed automatic, and it feels rather clunky under slow acceleration. It kind of jerks through each of the gears. If you're accelerating more quickly, it's much less of an issue, but yeah, for slow stop and go traffic here in the city, it's definitely very noticeable. One nice thing about accelerating with this diesel, though, is that we now have a new system on board from Cummins, a 2-stage turbo, which basically means that you're helping avoid some of that traditional turbo lag that you get with a big engine like this. It's pretty non-existent, and actually that's a fairly impressive feature. Now, in terms of fuel economy, all this week I've been driving this truck exclusively on city roads. I just haven't had a chance to take it out onto the highway much. And I've averaged about 15.5 liters per 100 kilometers, which for a 5-liter diesel pickup truck of this size isn't that bad. Obviously, once you get out onto the highway, things are going to improve, but for most of us, most of the time, we're going to use a truck like this in the city and then get out into the mountains on the weekends, perhaps with, you know, our camping trailer or something like that. Once you do get out onto the highway and those open roads, another nice thing about this truck is that it has a 98-liter fuel tank, so you're not going to have to stop and fuel up every 500 kilometers. This has a fairly significant range on it. And when we start to look at the interior layout a little bit more here, this is a huge improvement over the previous version of the Titan, which was looking dated and a little bit cheap, and certainly not living up to some of the other interiors that we're seeing in pickup trucks these days. A lot of soft touch surfaces here. I love this open pore wood as well. I think that classes things up nicely. One thing that I wish was a little bit bigger is this infotainment system screen. The infotainment system is pretty straightforward and pretty intuitive in terms of usage, but this screen is pretty tiny and doesn't compare very well to some of the other competitors that are out there. Another couple of things that I thought were a little bit weird on this truck. First up, at a $70,000 price point, I was expecting to have blind spot detection, which we don't have. We also don't have a sunroof, which seems like a big miss for a truck at this price point. One thing I like about this truck, because it is rather large, is the fact that we've got an excellent 360-degree parking camera, which makes it easier for backing into a trailer as well, because you can see your tow hitch ball right there, and you know that you're backing right into it the right way. And then, once you've actually got your trailer on board and you've plugged all the wiring in, another cool feature is that when you use your key fob, you can actually cycle through the different light functions on your trailer and make sure that your signal lights and brake lights are working, all that sort of thing. Once you've gone through that full cycle, the truck will honk its horn automatically to let you know that it's done all of its different tests. That's a really nice thing to have, so you don't have to have a second person with you all the time when you're hooking up a trailer and checking all your lights. So as I was mentioning earlier, you can't get a Titan XD in anything but a crew cab, which is actually great news for families, because a lot of times you have to pay a premium on top of the base price for a crew cab. Not the case here in the Titan XD, and you can see I've got lots of headroom as a full-size adult. Legroom's not bad too. I've set this driver's seat for a tall front driver like myself. And yeah, the back seat is actually pretty luxurious. We've got these beautiful leather seats, very soft in our Platinum Reserve package tester. We've also got heated rear seats, which is a nice feature to see. And we've got this kind of handy dual pocket system. So if you wanted to put, you know, kids' drawings in one pocket and maps in another, you could. This vehicle also does handle a rear-facing car seat pretty well. We're going to get to that in just a moment and see what that does to front passenger comfort. But you can see here that all those stylistic points that really kind of set off the front cabin of the vehicle carry through into the second row. Sometimes the second row is a bit of a throwaway. Not the case here in the Titan XD. We've got nice open pore wood. We've got that stitching throughout the door panels here, and these back seats are incredibly comfortable, and they look fantastic. But I will say that all these nooks and crannies and these perforations, this is going to be really tough to keep clean with a family. You can already see that cookie crumbs are starting to gather from our trips with Roger in this vehicle. Although it is really easy to put a car seat into this truck, way easier than in, say, the Toyota Tundra, which I was complaining about a couple of months ago when I reviewed that vehicle for you. So that's a nice plus for families here in the Titan XD. Now, let's take a look at something that I'm not so crazy about, and that's this storage system right here. So when I flip the back seat up, you can see that rather than having a totally flat load floor, which is great for the family dog or for hauling around even bikes or whatever, we've got this kind of clunky system where we've got storage bins down here, which are a little bit too small to really use for anything. And then if we want to have a flat load floor, we kind of go like this with this plasticky thing, and it folds flat like that. But you know, it feels, I don't know, just kind of cheap and clunky, and I don't think it's going to stand the test of time very well. That's just my take. Now this truck's pretty tall, over 6'2", because we were looking at this vehicle going into some parkades earlier this week, 2 of them in fact, that I had to back right out of because I wasn't going to fit. I was hitting those warning chains as we were entering the parkade. It is, again, I'm 6'2", and you can see here that it's quite a bit taller than me. One thing that's nice about this vehicle though is that with these running boards, they run all the way back beyond the second row, so if I needed to get something from the back of the storage of the cargo bed here, I can do that by stepping up onto the running boards and access stuff a little bit more easily. Now let's talk about the cargo bed a little bit, because there are things that I love, things I'm not so crazy about. Nice soft open tailgate, by the way, and a spray-in factory direct liner, which is a nice feature. Here's something else which is cool. Available on all 10 trims of the Titan XD standard is a gooseneck hitch underneath those 3 little sort of buttons there. So if you've got a larger horse trailer or something, you don't have to worry about getting that, you know, after the fact and paying a fair bit of money to get that installed. Now we've already talked about that storage system in the second row, which I don't really think works particularly well. And now let's check out the same kind of system, which is an option here in the bed. You can get these 2 bins on either side of the box for an extra cost, and it's meant to be able to store things, you know, and you can lock it and have it secure, but it's quite small and narrow. And so if you're a contractor and you actually want to use these for locking away your tools, it's not really going to do the trick for you. Let me show you what I mean. I grab my saw here, and like, you don't have a hope in hell of fitting that in there. So it kind of seems like if a contractor is going to use something like this, they're going to wind up going for a more traditional cargo box in the back of the vehicle's box here anyways. So this might be a feature that you consider foregoing if you've got larger items you're trying to store. So here's our second row rear-facing car seat that I was telling you about. I've just put that in place to show you what the front legroom is going to be like if you've got that. And it's not bad. We've got about 10 inches of legroom here. So for a tall adult with a rear-facing car seat in place, lots of headroom still, lots of legroom, totally fine. You could fit 2, even 3 car seats into this vehicle, no problem at all. So while the new Titan isn't perfect, it is such a huge improvement over the previous generation. It looks better on the outside, the interior refinement is much better, it drives much more nicely. My big question over the long term is the previous generation of the Titan did have some reliability issues over the long term. It did have some rust out issues as well. I know that Nissan has put a lot of money and resources and time into the development of this truck, and it's a very important new vehicle on the company's lineup. So it will be interesting to see how it does over the long term. I think the fact that we now have a Cummins diesel on board one of the Japanese company's vehicles is pretty impressive, and the fact that it's a Cummins as well is a real gut punch to the Dodge Ram brand. Although calling this a Japanese truck is a little bit of a stretch because it's been developed in the States and it's been built in the States, and really it's much more of an American vehicle than Japanese. But I'd like to know what you think of this truck. Would you be game to jump into the Titan XD and give it a shot? Would you choose diesel over gas? What are your thoughts? Leave a comment below. You can always get in touch with me on Twitter as well, @FamilyWheels, and please subscribe while you're at it. It would be great to have you join the ranks. Next week on the program, we're into a very different kind of vehicle, the new 2017 C-Class Coupe from Mercedes-Benz. We're going to see how that one stacks up. Until then, check out familywheels.ca for all of our reviews, and have a great week.